CIS120. Oh, you take 120 with this. Perfect. So take it .py. The text file. Yeah, a lot of people are not happy about that program. I kept trying to get my dad to get all mad about it. Do it. So my dad kept me criticized it a lot. Efficiency wise.
Did you guys figure out what our problem was? You were doing that troubleshooting, right? Let's get that brought. Tell me, what kind of things did you find? We had our program that wasn't working, so you guys were going to do some troubleshooting. You guys have that program, gentlemen, do you have that program open that we were working on last time that you were going to troubleshoot? No problem. It's our CD audio. Let's get that open and get some troubleshooting going on. I'd like to hear a little bit about what our problem is, because I fixed it. So I don't have that problem anymore. So one of you guys is going to have to share your screen so that we can troubleshoot it together, see what's going on. Because sometimes I fix things and forget to Control Z to put back the problem, like this time. So we've got some problems we've got to fix. These kinds of problems are the hardest to find too, because we're getting that weird error message, right, about not having an instance of our CD, our audio instance. So what in the world? Do we have anybody back in the back that would share? We always leave them out. Let's see, how about Keegan's back there hiding. Will you share your screen on the Zoom session? Do you have the bug, or did you fix it?
I have it.
You have it? Okay, let's, you will share.
Was it the menu or the audio CD?
The audio CD one. So I think our menu was working. That's why we just dropped that audio CD one, because it was all buggy. We didn't want to mess with it at the time.
How do I share?
I noticed you guys just like ignored that bug. Didn't worry about it. Now we're going to have to fix it. It's not going to go away even if we ignore it. We want to have a good example of a working one. So let me unshare mine so that you can share yours. I bet that will help. I'm just up here hogging it. All right, see if that's better. Okay, can you run it for us and remind, and let's review what our problem was here. If we bring up our app, everything's working. It's displaying our default CD. We click reset and add one. Everything's okay, is that right? We're able to add.
You could update it, right?
Right, so if we try to change it, we're crashing. So we're crashing within our load form data method, and remember that method says take whatever is in our CD instance, the CD instance properties, and put that data into the text boxes on our form to display so that we can see it. And what it's telling us is you don't have a CD instance here to be doing that with. Yes, sir?
I get a bunch of different errors, which I wasn't getting last.
Oh, okay. Well, hang on and we'll fix them. So let's think about Keegan's here. Let's go ahead and stop. And I'd like to set a breakpoint. We'd like to set a breakpoint before we get to this error, because it's too late if we get to this error. So let's find a place we're calling this load form data. I think we are calling it, scroll all the way down and let's look at our method. Yeah, our selected index changed. For some reason, since this is has to do with us updating that data. I feel like this is a good place for us to set a breakpoint. So let's set our breakpoint perfect right there. And I want to see if it's this execution of our load form data that's causing us trouble. Now notice we might have to guess a little bit, you know, to do some educated guessing about where in our code this call could be going awry. So go ahead and run it. Let's do that same thing. Thank you. If yours is having trouble, just help us debug and we'll post our final version, but I want you guys to try to fix it. Okay, so we are in our breakpoint here, stepping through our code. Do you see anything? Was that the correct place? If we want to be sure, let's go ahead and step into. Now, when we step into our code, we should be able to see our CD instance, but it looks like it's got some stuff here. So that all looks good. So let's keep stepping. Now we're going to execute that load form data method. Let's go ahead and step into it. Here we go. Is it going to work okay? Now, this message is telling us that the debugger is not going to go into our audio CD class to show us that getter and setter code being executed. It says you could change that if you wanted to by changing a setting. We're okay with that right now. So let's just say no, we don't want to continue being notified. We know that that getter is being executed. Now keep stepping through. This is looking like it's okay, isn't it? So far, we're going good. Keep stepping. Keep going. We're setting up our text box. Looks good.
One more.
So now we need to change something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's change something and try it again. So we saw going through, now we're in our class creating our instance. Are we running it again?
No, that's the sound looking too.
Keep going.
No.
That crashed. So
123.
we did run it again, didn't we? Let's go back, stop execution, and let's look at what we saw there. If you scroll down to the very bottom and you look at your selected index changed method, it is executing for every time we have a line in our list box. So every time it executes, it's executing multiple times pretty much. So if it's working and executing for us when we've actually clicked on an item and we're looking at that particular item, then our code is good. But when it's running through all of the other items in the list box that aren't selected, there's no selected item, then things aren't working properly. So let's put an if statement in there before we do any code. So you can close out of your breakpoint if you guys have that breakpoint set up. And we want to put an if statement at the very beginning. And we're going to say if we want to use our selected index variable. So selected index I think maybe we would be, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at things. I think we would be safer if we used our list box audio selected index instead of our variable. So if the list box audio selected index is not equal -1, remember it'll be equal to -1 if there's nothing selected. So if it's not -1, there is something selected. And let's put all of our code within that if statement. Now let's see if that does anything for us. Did it work? Fixed it. Okay, so everything was good with all of our class information from the very beginning with the way we were maintaining things. The event procedure was being executed or fired multiple times when the event occurred. So our code wasn't taking that into consideration. And so that's why we're having our little bug there. So great job. These kinds of things are really hard to troubleshoot. So don't forget you can use that debugger and see what's going on. It might take you a few times of running through it. I went through it a few times myself to see, oh, that is for sure what's going on, and try to figure out a way to solve that problem. So really, really good job. Thank you, sir, for remote controlling. Give him a hand. I'll get that one set up. Like I said, on Canvas. Get mine closed. So let's take a look at processing sequential files. Some new stuff for us for this week. So far, everything we've written program-wise was data that just disappeared as soon as our program was done, right? We would type something in, it displays, and then it's gone. That's not real world. Real world, we have persistent data. We save our information on Google to access our account, and that data is saved. It's persistent. It does not just go away. Yes, sir?
Like saving a game?
Like saving a game, exactly. So if you can't save it, then every time you play, you have to start over again. That's how our programs have been. Sometimes they're like, oh, I can't test this again with the same data, but you guys have done it. So one way that we can make data persistent is saving those files, our save file. And a lot of times if we're working with data, we're just going to be able to save a sequential data file. We're going to work with databases in C#2, and you'll get a chance to work with those in a lot of different places in your job. Working with sequential files is like a first step to getting there. So it's not the end all be all. Click. Oh, I got to put the thingy in. Good job. I bet this will make it work. It's like magic. Okay, so basics. When we're looking at a file in a flowchart, we're going to see this symbol, this cylinder, and it's a disk drive. That's why it's this picture here. So an old disk drive that kind of looks like this. We use files all the time, right? You guys have save files for games. You know the exe files that execute. The games are files. They're just in a different format. If I'm looking at a picture, an image, it's just a file. If I'm looking at a Word document, it's just a file. An Excel spreadsheet, just a file. I could read any of those files in my program, right? I could read through it and do some things to it. The only thing that makes those files special are the control codes and things that are saved within them. So if I have a Photoshop file like a .psd, then Photoshop has put control codes like our \n, that's a control code. They put control codes in there that mean something to their code. So in Photoshop, they know if they see this \D07, that means to format in some way or whatever. And so that's what happens with Word and Excel and everybody else. They write their own control codes out with the data, and then they're able to process that file and read that data back in. So we can do that same thing with our program if we want. If we want to create our own special type of file that has specific formatting, we could do that. We can save data to files. We can read data from files. You guys have probably all messed with that INI files, that save files, all of those kinds of things. When we're working with C#, we're going to use the system.io namespace to access files. We've been writing source code. We know that when we run our source code, it gets compiled into like this intermediate file that the compiler can execute. So that's kind of a program file. We know that data files could be something that just contain data. Really, the only difference is how they're used and what we do with them. So we can have things that are exactly the same. But here's what we would think of when we think of a standard data file. With a standard data file, we're going to have rows in the file that we call records. Okay, so every row in that file is a record. Each record has multiple columns. Those columns are called fields. So when I'm working with a sequential file, a text file, I'm going to have records and fields. Looking at this file, I have a record for each student, and then I have fields for the student name and several scores. Looks like that's what that data is. Now, over the years, we've had lots of storage media for us to save things to, save data. You to think about sequential access versus direct access. Here's the difference. With a VHS tape, if you remember, if some of you may not, you can't just jump right to a spot. You have to fast forward. And you have to fast forward through that tape or rewind to the exact spot.
And eventually they wear out.
And they do wear out from all that fast forwarding and rewinding. That's a sequential media. The only way I can access something is to move to that point in the file sequentially and get to that data. If I look at a DVD or a CD or a hard drive, solid state drive, whatever, with that kind of media, I can access a point of storage directly. So I have random access. So this is a much more valuable storage media for us, right? That old sequential access makes things really hard. But that sequential access is kind of like why we access files the way we do. So kind of think about that history, then some of it makes sense as far as why we have to go through a file in a logical way. So what way is that? Well, if we think about it from a flow chart, we're going to start our program. We have to open our file. We have to actually make that connection to that specific physical data file. Once we've opened the file, we can read the first record from the file. We can check then to see if we're at the end of the file. If we weren't at the end of the file, we can process that record, and then we're going to read another one. Did we hit the end of file? No. We process it, read another one. When we do hit the end of that file, we need to close it, and then we can be done. So whenever we're processing a sequential file like this, we're going to have some looping going on, right? So we got to open it at the beginning, close it at the end, probably really nicely within a try-catch, right? Because we could have direct access disk problem, and then we're going to loop through all of those rows or records in our file. So we're going to do this, wait, that really sucks. Great animation. Finally get to the end of the file, and we're done. Now let's look at some of the folders that we have in our Visual Studio project. We've looked at them really quickly. We've opened those things. But when you look at your project folder, some important things that you have, of course, are your properties and your references, all that great stuff. I'm going to open mine. Let's open one here. Mine is still saved on my users folder. I don't have it moved, so I have to go digging around in there to find it. Let's see, one of those last ones that we did. Here's our audio CD form. Now, if I open this project folder, first of all, my solution folder would contain a folder for every project. So if I had more than one project, I would have more than one folder in that solution folder. This one only has one project, so if I go into that project folder, then I'm going to see some corresponding folders that show up in the Solution Explorer when we're looking at Visual Studio. So you guys know your program.cs file is all of the startup stuff. In this example, my form1.cs is all of my code for my form. What if I want to run this program from outside of Visual Studio? Well, if you go into your bind folder for binary, we should be able to look in the debug folder and find the executable for our application. Okay, so then we could copy that to another place if we wanted to. All right. So looking at the bind folder, the debug folder, this is the execution folder. This is where things are running from for our project. Now, this is all important because if we start trying to access files, we need to know where we're putting these files. And by default, if we just try to open some text file, Visual Studio is going to look here in this project folder, this execution folder, to find it. So if we have it saved someplace else, we'll need to specify that when we try to open our file. And you guys know how to access all of your files. I think that's all good. So let's try a project or two. The first project I'd like to do is just looking at the file system itself. So let's open Visual Studio. Know if you have any questions, and I want to create a new project. We'll make it a Windows Form app. Oh, I lied. Let's make a console app just to mess with you. And I'm going to use .NET Framework, remember. And for this console app, we're just going to be displaying directory info. So let's call it Chapter 13 Directory Structure. And looking at our directory structure, the first thing that we want to do is update all of our using statements. Let's use system and system.io. And we're just going to access actually file information in this program, not actual files. So let's set up a directory info object. So the directory info class is available to us and gives us all sorts of methods that we can use to find out information about files and folders on our system. Now, a directory is just the old name for a folder. So a directory and a folder are the same thing. So for directory info here, I'm going to name this object dir, and it's going to be a new instance of the directory info class. And I want it to give me information about the current directory, and that's what the dot stands for. So whatever folder I'm currently running in, is the folder that is going to be used here. So let's put some of those. dir equals a folder, and the dot equals the current folder. So let's output some information about that. We'll do our console.write line, see if you guys can remember how to use console stuff. And we're going to output this string current directory, and then backslash and this one, and a parameter, and another backslash n. Now what we want to replace our parameter with is using the directory class. We're going to use the get current directory method. Okay, so if we were looking at our textbook or any other pieces of information, we could find out all of this stuff. But let's just look. If I say I want to know about the directory class in C#, I should be able to go to the docs on Microsoft's website and find out all the information about the directory class. Now, when I'm looking at the Microsoft documentation, this might be something that I just found something in some searching, and I know that this directory class is available. So how do I figure out what I could do with it? Well, if I look at this here, great information. First of all, it tells us what our using needs to be, what namespace it's in. Over here, it tells us there are some examples. It tells us what kind of methods are available. I'm going to click on methods. So it gives us a whole list of all of the different things that we could do. So you could spend some time looking through all that, and definitely it could take some time to find things, but that's some fun in experimenting. So we don't have to do that right now because I have the information that we need, and I know that we want to use the get current directory method of this directory class. So notice that we're setting it up in two ways. First of all, we're setting up a directory info object that is associated with the current directory. Second, we're outputting the name of the current directory by using this directory class. Let's run this. I want to put a read here first. Silly thing. Guess I better put console.read since I don't have that using statement. And I'll run. Now my current directory is the one on this C drive. Again, makes it doubly important for us to be checking things into TFS. If yours is on your H drive, that's okay too. It might not be able to show it to you. Is it able to show everybody their current directory? Did you see it? Okay, good. Some of the H drive stuff gets mad. All right, so now that's important to us because we might have a need in our program to know what the file system currently is. We might need to save some things out there. So it's good that we can get that information. Let's do a little bit more outputting. We're going to do a console.write line, and we're going to output our file name. We're going to add write for 52 characters because we want this to be kind of in a column. We're going to add some more. We want another label that says size, and we're going to give it 10 columns. And lastly, creation time. Get this backspaced here. Get cleaned up. So kind of a heading for us. And we've got our column size specified so that as we go through, we're going to read all of the files that are in this directory and output each of the file names. So this is just a heading for us for that information. So to go through all of the files that are in our directory, we can use the for each command. We want to find out information about each of these files, so we will be using the file info class. Again, we could use the directory info class information online to find out what all methods are available for it, or we can use the IntelliSense and kind of get an idea there. We want to get all of the files in this folder. So I think we want to use the get files method. Now in our get files method, IntelliSense is telling us, returns a file list from the current directory matching the given search pattern. Well, I know a lot about search patterns with files and commands, so I know if I want to list all of the files, I'm going to do star dot star, right? And that means match all of the files in that folder. So everything in that folder will be listed. Now within our for each, we need to process each of those files. So let's set up a string variable to hold the name. And just like a class we created, now that we've got this instance created of the file info class, notice all of the properties that are available to us. So we can see the file's name. So we're going to grab it. We can get its size. We can find out when it was created. So now that I've gathered all this information about this file, let's output it in our write line statement. We're going to set up our formatting first. We're not going to use the fancy kind. Okay, let me get it in here and then you could copy it. Okay, so for our write line, our formatting is going to be parameter 0. Parameter 1 is for 12 columns, and it's a number with 0 decimal places. Parameter 2 is for 20 columns, and it is a general date. And I need to close that curly. So that's what our formatting is specifying for that. Now, what we want to replace those parameters with, first of all, our first parameter will be our name, and we'll use the pod right with 45. It's nice when they already have it figured out for us. We'll add in our size and our creation time. Now, once you've got that for each loop coded, you should be able to run and should see a list of all of the files in that folder. Now, we don't need to do a lot more with our file access stuff, but know that it's out there and available. So if you need to create a file, you might have a special reason to create something that doesn't exist, or check if something is out there. Some people just have it set up where if a file exists, then they know their program has already run and they don't need to do some things. Is it working, Edward? What's fun?
It says creation time does not exist in the current context.
Okay, there we go.
Oh, did you fix it? Good job. Okay, let's see what mine looks like. Oh, fancy formatting. So it's a good example of that. So we're looking at our directory here for our project. Yes, sir?
The size says no.
No.
It's 0.
0.
Oh,
That is the same.
Yeah.
it's not oh, 0.
I was like, huh? Thank you. I was thinking, I was like, oh. Okay, so what if we change our file directory info here from, instead of the dot using the current directory, let's change it to this, to the C drive. I'll put the root of the C drive. Why did I have to put it twice?
So it didn't think that that you were using a format command?
Exactly. So let's see then if we can get more info from the C drive. Not too much. Did it go there? Oh, it's still in my users folder. But it's giving me a listing of the C drive. I guess I could try my H drive. Let's see how that looks, if it can do it or not. When we go to our H drive and it's on the network, sometimes we can have some issues, but it looks like it was able to list it okay. Now, on my H drive, I have some folders, but notice that the command we used, it's only listing files. So I'm not seeing in the folders that I have within my H drive. So lots of fun that you can have with files and folders and creating all that stuff. It is great. Something got me. Okay, let's go back to the GUI one. We're going to create a little application now that'll look somewhat like this. We're going to have this list box, and we're just going to let people type in their favorite saying, and then we're going to store it in a text file. We're going to add more to this application as we go so that we can read in a file if one exists. But for right now, we're just going to create a new text file. So let's save this application that we just did and close it. And again, remember, it's totally just FYI because the file access stuff is really handy to have. All right, so I want a new project. It's going to be a Windows Form app. It's going to be chapter 13, sayings app, create file. So we create a file in this one. So I want to update my form properties. I'm going to update my text property to say favorite sayings storing app. Let's set your back color to something that you like. And your for color. And then I'm going to up my font, like I always do. So did you notice, have you ever noticed that with our Windows forms, we're using a sans serif font? What does that mean?
It means it's without the little beats. Like if you look at some text will have little tiny beats on print, and some will not. Times New Roman, I believe, is a serif font. the sans serif fonts, they're easier to read on computers.
So we don't have to worry about all that fancy,
Yeah.
weird stuff.
Sometimes you might want it, but usually you don't if you're looking at a computer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so we want to use something simple like that. If you are noticing the default font, it is a sans serif. That means it's not that fancy kind of text. We want it to be readable. So we don't want those little, like she's saying, feetsies and things with it. Another thing is we might want to make sure that our font has every letter be the same size. Does that make sense? You know, a true font, because otherwise it's going to be really hard for us to line things up in a columnar fashion. So if we were using Times New Roman, where the letter M takes up a whole bunch more space than the letter I, that it would be really hard for us to line things up in a columnar manner on our form. So just be aware if you get to trying in some really fancy fonts, you could have more issues with alignment. So great. All right. So I think that's all I need for my form. I'll come back later and set up my accept button so that I can have it work when I press enter. And then I want to label across the top. And let's make our label say, this will be a heading for us. We'll make it say, enter favorite saying. I think I want it to be a little bit bigger. I'll make it bold, make it stand out there a little bit. Now underneath that, I want a text box, but we're going to make this text box multi-line in case their saying is long. So after I draw it, I'll go back in my text box properties and I'm going to change the multi-line property to true. And then I want to change my name to TXTBX saying. And then I'll have a button. Now my button is going to be named ETN store, and I want it to say store saying in the text. Anything else you want to change about it? Change. Mess with it. All right. Shouldn't need too much going on here. We are really going to have just 2 or 3 things that we need to worry about here. First of all, let's start out with our form load. And in our form load, we are going to open a file, and that file would be our sayings file. And we're just going to have it all prepared. So it'll be empty, but let's do that in our form load. So double click on a blank spot in your form to create the form load. Now, because we're accessing a file, we need to check our using statements. And we need to keep Windows Forms, but we need to add system.io. Now, this code that I'm putting here in the form load could also go in our constructor. Don't forget that. It's pretty much about the same. By common conventions, it would make more sense for us to put it in the form load because it's an event procedure, and that's what we're used to using with forms. Okay, so I want everything to be within a try-catch. And, oops, I need a global variable, an instance variable. Let me do some Control-Z in here. Start over. Okay, at my class statement, I want to create an instance class level variable. And this variable is going to be a stream writer. And the stream writer class allows us to write a stream of data, whatever thoughts we have, out to a text file. So just like we could write a stream of data out to the console, we can write it out to our text file. So we're going to set this stream writer up as a class level field so that we can access it from all of our different event procedures. So now back to our form load. We want to start with a try-catch. And the first thing that we want to try is to allocate a file to our stream writer. So we're going to say we've got a new stream writer and we want to use file. Let's try this file that doesn't exist. Bob. Okay, so we're using the @ sign to say we want to use an absolute string. Haven't seen that since like chapter 2, but it's just the same as the interpolated string with the $sign, right? Only now the @ sign is saying, don't worry about these backslashes or anything that you see in there. Just take this string as I give it to you. So if I took the @ sign out, I would have to worry about each of these backslashes, and I could double them up, and that would take care of the problem also. So either way is fine, but the absolute string is kind of easier to read. Okay, so this statement is going to allocate this file. So if it doesn't work, we're going to get an error. Let's catch it. The catch, we would probably encounter an error like the directory not found exception. If we get a directory not found exception, we're going to save that exception object in an object named exe. Oh, and we need to put a message on our form so that we can output some information about that error. I'm going to go ahead and type this and get an error. I want to fix that. So I'm going to right click on my tab and say new vertical tab group so that I can see if I can fix it. I've got my toolbox too small. So I want to get a label. In our last application, we used a text box. It doesn't matter. I'm going to put this label down here at the bottom of the form. I'm going to undo this because it looks dumb. And I want to name this label LBL message. Now, right now, that message label says label 2. We'll be changing it in our form load, so it'll end up saying something different. No, it won't. We should make it say something different ourselves. I'm looking at our code going, no, it's not. So let's change our text property, and let's say, welcome to the Sayings app. Okay, so I want to go back to the form load. And in my form load, that error message should go away. Now, the catch that we've supplied is for if a directory not found exception occurs. We could have another kind of exception. So let's catch any sort of system.io.io exception that might occur. Again, we'll catch that as an exception named EXC, and we'll put that exception message into our label. Now, if we got the directory not found exception, we added this invalid directory message because we know that it was an invalid directory. But down here, we just got some sort of IO exception. We don't know what it is. Okay, so let's run. Right now, we don't have our button doing anything, but we should be able to execute our form load. And that looks like a good message. I'm getting invalid directory, could not find a part of the path, C:\bob /saying.txt, which is true because I don't have a Bob folder on my C drive. So that was a good message. Now, what if we try that a little different and we just make it be saying.txt. Let's run it. Now it says it. So did it create it for us? Let's close. Right now, looking at the Solution Explorer, we're looking at our solution. If you look at the toolbar, we haven't used the toolbar a lot in Solution Explorer, but if you look at the toolbar, find the Solutions and Folders tool. If you click the drop-down arrow, where am I? Is it working? You can change it to show your files and folders, and then you can expand. And in my debug folder, sure enough, I see that saying.txt file has been created. So it didn't create it in the Bob folder because there wasn't a Bob folder, but if there had been one, it would have gone ahead and created it for us. Can't find it? Okay, so it's weird. It's this icon here that says Solutions and Folders. See, if you toggle back and forth, it'll go from Files to your Solution Explorer. Now, when you're looking at Files, you're just going to see your folders and expand your project folder, your bin folder, and your debug folder. You don't have one?
I don't have a debug. Oh wait, here it is.
Yeah.
Ah, there it is. Got it.
All right. Now, if you click on that file,
It's blank.
it's blank. Does it show you? It tries to show it to you, though?
Yeah.
Now, don't forget to switch back to your Solution Explorer view from your file view. because that does kind of behave very differently. All right, so we know now that just by saying we wanted to create this new StreamWriter object, it created the file for us. Now let's create our button code. So go back to your form and double click your button. Now in our button, we want to just take whatever they type and save it to that file. So again, we want to put it within a try catch, because we're working with a file. So in our try, but it's the thing, we're going to use the syntax file. Remember, that's our file object that we pre-allocated as a class level variable, and then we created an instance of it in our form load. Now we're going to access it and write to it. Look, our commands are just almost exactly the same as your console commands. So we're going to do a write line, and we want to write out whatever is in our text box text property. So instead of saying console.writeLine, we just say file instance.writeLine. Now I want to clear out our saying so they could type another one. And we're going to put the focus back on their saying. All right, and then let's do some catching here. For our catch this time, again, we're going to catch any sort of system.io exception. And let's see if I can get this right. What do I want to do? If I catch an IO exception, I want to save it as an exception object named EXC, and then I'm going to put that exception object's message into my label. Okay, so let's run it. I want to put in a saying here. The early bird catches the worm. Store saying. Now, if I close, that should be in my text file, right? I'm going to go to my folder view, find my saying.txt file, but it's still empty. Is yours empty too?
Yep.
So our problem is we didn't close that file. So we can write to it all day long, but if we don't properly close it, none of the updates that we make will be committed to the file. They'll just go away. So a good place for us to close it would be when somebody closes our form. So let's create that event procedure. We have to go to our form and click on our form. So looking at your form properties, change to the events and find that form closing. Remember, we double clicked on form closing, and that creates the event procedure for us. And in our try catch, we're going to close our file. If we catch an error, we're going to save that message. So notice how this application works. In our form load, we open the file. We keep writing to it while they press, click on our button. We need to make it to where they can press enter. And then we close the file when they close the form. So could two people use this application at the same time? No, because that file is open, right? The whole time our form is open. Did you find it?
Oh, so yeah. Every time you begin and you create, and you store it again, it overwrites the old file once. In Python, it's the same way. If it creates a new file about the same name, this one.
Yeah, you probably need to adjust the codes a little. Standing, like array or.
Yeah. Or better yet, where you can name it yourselves.
Yeah.
Like in Microsoft Word.
Gone crazy. Okay, I'm just gonna post this one. The issues. All right, let's put some comments in here first. Sorry about that. We'll post it and get everybody all cleaned up here. All right, so in this one, before we post it, let's test it. I'm sure you guys did. I'm gonna run it, put in my saying, early bird catches the worm, store it. Now when I close my form, I should be able to look at my files and I should see my saying saved in there. Oh, there it is, early bird catches the worm. Now if I go back and run my application again, what happens? Does it overwrite it?
Yeah.
It overwrites it. So what if we save, let me run this. So what if we run, sorry, got to go back to my Solution Explorer. If we run it and type multiple sayings, chicken crossed the road. I don't know why. All of the, you know, all of the Ozarks ones are not appropriate. Okay, we'll save that one. All right, now I should have 2 in my text file. So let's check. Yep, I do. So everything is good. And I have this blank line because I pressed enter on that first one. So I actually saved 2 records in the file. And that's a really important point when we go to reading our file, right? If we have a blank record, could cause trouble depending on how we have our application set up. Okay, so let's document this one. I'm going to go back to my Solution Explorer view, look at my code, and document it really quick, and then I'll get this one posted so that we can update a little bit. So for our class, we'll say that our app here is the Sayings app. You are the developer. Save a text file. Now we've already got a comment here about our class level variable. Let's document our constructor. This is our default. No, our constructor for the form. And we have our form load executes before the form is displayed. And then of course our try catch. Does that seem clear to you? Sometimes it's more understandable when you're using the try catch, when you're thinking about things here. because we see that if we have problems with that file, we've got to catch those errors because we don't want this thing to crash all the time. Our users. All right, our button store click event. This event stores the saying in the text file. Now with Windows 10, it's a little harder to delete a file while it's open than it used to be, but it sure used to be possible. It's a little better. Okay, for our form closing, this event will execute when the form is closing. Remember, we're going to be closing our file there because we don't want that file to be left open. Nobody else will be able to access it. We'll lose our data. Okay, I'm going to close the solution and we'll get it saved. I'm going to zip it up and post it real quick so that we can. It won't let me create zip files on the C drive. Hang on.
There's one. Word.
Hody ho. Okay. Go ahead and create another project. And this one, let me get this out here on the announcements. Okay, it's posted. As we look at the PDF document, I'm going to pull that up real quick. We'd like to have our sayings app let us read data in. I'm going to pull that up and see where we can look at it. And I double clicked on it instead of opening with Adobe Acrobat. Remember, if you open it with Acrobat, you'll have the links. So I want to look at chapter 13 here. That's talking about file access. So we were looking at file streams. I'm on page 848. Well, and it's not going to let me look at it. But you're going to see that you can read things in the same way. Now, we'll look a little bit at that next time. But if there's something that, if you want to get started on the assignment that's due, you'll definitely find some examples here in the Sayings app in this chapter, looking at reading text files. There's a lot of different examples that they have for us. Usually after you look at it once and it gives you that error, you can go back and see it. So again, we'll look at that next time, but I want you to feel like you were left out on your own if you wanted to take a look at it before then. I gotta wake you guys up. We've been being kind of boring this morning. Let's do something different.
Did you say you wanted to create a new solution?
Yeah, but I'm just gonna not do that today. So you can just close it. Being lazy here. We're gonna look at something a little different. Okay, let's try a Quizlet Live because we've been doing too much coding. Okay, this Quizlet Live is gonna be some different chapters. This is the one where you want to use your phone, if you can, and it's going to assign teams. So go to the URL www.quizlet.live and put in this code. Let me know if you have my phone if you need it. It's kind of gross. Oh, that was a bunch. We should have like 15. Look around, see if somebody besides you needs some help. Get them going. Are you having trouble? Make sure you do the www.quizlet.live. If you do quizlet.com, it doesn't work. Go get 11. Where's our other 4? Find them, find them. Come on, let's go. $12. I know, no, it took a second to show up there. He was in and it still wasn't acting like it. Oh. Isaac is on his computer, so you got to go to him. Anybody else? You ready? I'm going with 14 then. All righty. Find your people.
This is gonna go well.
It'll go good. What a great group. Oh my goodness, you guys are unbeatable. Oh, we have 2 teams of 4 and 2 of 3. Okay, you guys ready? I think everybody's ready. Like pretty ready. We sneaked out of there. Okay, you guys got it. Start it. Let's go.
Number of elements in the array. Size of the array. Precedence of the operators, non-operators, variable, no names. Which state? No. That's selection statements. Selection statements. No, we can't do that. You're right.
You all have different ones. Gotta work together.
Oh, they're not. Wait, what?
You all have different ones. You all have different answers. You have to work together.
That's a naughty. Oh, I got that. Yeah, nice job. Okay, so I have 11 associated. Try that. One-way selection. Yeah, that's the one-way selection statement. Remember, which I have right now. Yeah. Nice job. That left associated makes sense. Would be the right answer. Yeah, nice. Elements in the array. That's the size of the array. No. Subscriptive variables. Maybe. Between size and you think so? Yep. Nice job, guys. Oh, selection. Nice. Right behind.
Whoa. Everybody started getting the hang of it. Yeah, there's those ostriches. Oh my goodness. Good job. Okay. It's going. You guys are getting the hang of it. I saw everybody just jump like crazy.
Next to the next thing. Oh, we just got all I had was lining up the array. Oh, infinite array, infinite. Was it ternary operator? Yeah. Yes, good job. Okay. All right. We've used for including data with exactly the values. I don't know. I know it's not a so that's not an issue. Maybe. Get that. Like the right. Is that compiled time? It's validation. All I have is line. Gotta get it. Oh, yeah. Yes, that's like the array. Nice job. Nice. You got it. Awesome. Nice job.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Are you seeing the same questions, or are there still more? You've seen quite a few. One more. We'll do one more because it looks like other people are feeling like they got robbed. That's it. One time. All right. Ugh. Now are you disconnected? Click on it. It should let you back in. Ah, there it is. Okay.
Not me. Two-way statement. Oh. That was the correct. Well, we gotta try something. Try it. Dang it. Wait, what? You had it. You have to push it on. But then they give Nice job. All right. It's all right. Nice job. Additional operator, iteration. Iteration. Oh, it is iteration. I was thinking of an if-state. Who has that? No way. One error. I know it's not primary iteration. Maybe it's no. Yeah,
The doctor just went twice. Yay! Good job, good job, good job. Very good. Okay, great. You guys can work on finishing some things up or getting things started or get out of here because you've been doing a lot of work and you deserve to get a little bit done. I hope you have a great weekend.
We can get him stuff on the 50-50 stuff. Yeah, we had like two. We had two answers. Like it got to be either one of these, and we always got the wrong one. You got two. Oh, you're not gonna say for your stuff. Yeah, David should be here. David, there's no. You'll recognize him.
I go to the gym instead of stay here.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
I feel like I'm smart. What's your grade in this class? Wait, I mean, you're doing just, I don't know, just one class, right? That's not different. Okay, what's your GPA? I mean, overall, I'm better. What is your GPA overall? What is your GPA? I want to talk about it. Tell me. I mean, I just don't share any information with anyone. Well, I share my GPA. I
I'll share my GPA. Would you like to hear?
I mean, I'm a close person, so.
I will share my GPA. You click on the question. Would you like to hear my GPA?
Not really. I'm not interested in other people.
Oh, you claim you're smarter than me.
I mean, I am better than you.
Oh, really? I'm really interested, actually.
What?
That's my GPA.
3.7.
3.7.
3.76. I can prove it next time. I just don't have time right now. I could probably work at 3.5. Still not better than you, but still.
I worked my butt off because I like to go to school. Oh, what are you doing there? I'm looking at SBU right now, but I actually got an email from Cornell. A couple of emails from them, like they were basically I'm talking to them right now, but it's their tuition's kind of high. I think it's like 30 grand a year, so not less than pay for a lot of it. It'd be nice to be able to go. Like even University of Massachusetts was cool, top 20 in computer science, but their tuition is again through the roof. I gotta talk to the Phi Kappa guys over there. The opposite of the Phi Theta Kappa. Oh yeah, yeah. So what? This program? What? We're talking about. Oh, Phi Theta Kappa versus if you have a certain GPA, you get an SBU, but they like think SBU what? SBU Southern Methodist. Oh. Kirsten recommended. University of Massachusetts. It's that Cornell University.
Hey, Miss Riley.
I got the honor.
Can you help me with something?
Sure.
This year.
What you got?
On one of the projects today, when I added, I sent the add source. I accidentally put it in the wrong source.
Mr. Yerby wants me to go in, but yeah, that's the problem. What?
Actually,
No, I never even went in. I'm in a different office.
when I wanted it,
I think it counts for it. So
is there any way I can do it?
completely different. You know, show us a Jim Hortons. And guys,
Oh, there's
JavaScript right now. Some last year.
Oh, that's it was two
Physics. Both over the summer, I got these classes. That dude is a wizard. Okay, so it's not good. So because he took calculus 2 physics over the summer, they were calculus physics classes. I was like, that's 10 credit hours over the summer. Is it possible? Yeah, no, he had both E's in it. I don't know how he did it. Like,
I tried this.
He does
Nothing to bring it.
I said, yeah, let's go ahead and push 30s, 40s, get
in high school. Checking in whatever the word is for this one.
Basically the same thing.
Yes.
Never refers to the. There it is.
Okay, so
It has a name.
So
What do you mean by that?
you could delete it. It might push that delete issue. Issue too. So I just want to worry about it.
Because it's not something that gets graded, so
Right,
it doesn't
it's
have.
not gonna hurt anything.
Okay.
It's just annoying. I know it's super annoying, but it won't hardly let you rearrange things.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you committed.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just see. Let's just write it to.
What was that? Yeah, total number 3.74.
So if that whole everything fix it before I can run it. So we
Keep telling them, I keep like, start taking it seriously. This is you're going to get past your math, trigonometry, or calculus. You're going to get so quickly in class. I think I took a break on Easter Sunday, and I actually closed behind that stuff. I hope next semester is going to be a little bit easier since I'm taking 3 classes, but yeah, they're going to be 2 hard classes. That's for sure. So, during fall or summer.
yeah.
Because I thought that, well,
Yeah, we should just be able to find that text
I
file.
would
Yeah.
drop my math
And
class
debug.
over the project. I couldn't.
And that'll be a better way for us to check it out.
Right, it's class.
You know, you got to take it with the process thing. I saw who's teaching it over the summer. It's how this. Don't like it. I haven't been held over under we need grades. It's not really good. I know.
I don't think that's it.
There had an event yesterday. For job interview techniques. Forgot what it was. Here, Factory, E-Factory. And I didn't have time to go. Yeah, I got so much trouble how That's where you get to Mexico. Seriously, yeah. I mean, you'll probably get more benefits because you're here legally than out. Hey, you had to go through the hard way to get into this country. It's worth it. Yeah. I'll text her really quick. No, nice. Thanks. Not here in like 10 minutes. That's just like Kirsten. You need right now. He said he wasn't Discord. Yeah, there's a part of their video game team right now. Making a video game. What? They're making a video game and I'm doing contractual for it. Yeah. So an hour and a half of music to write over the summer. Yeah, a bunch of sound design stuff, so it's gonna be fun.
What program are you using?
What's up?
Like, are you using it before? Can you make it go there?
No, I have sample libraries that I've out.
I see.
So like I'm actually really into the Mass Effect soundtrack, so I actually have the synthesizers that they used and stuff for it. So I actually had some of the sounds, and I actually researched some of the virtual instrument libraries they used, because all of it was actually the VST instruments that they used. None of it was actually real orchestra. I think too expensive. EA wouldn't give them a budget to do it, unfortunately.
I mean, it still sounds.
That sounds incredible. So that's where I work. That's what I do. So I use I have sample libraries from Vienna, Austria that I use. They're really good. So I'm writing all the music for it. That's what I do in my spare time, is I just write music, orchestra music. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. I would love to work over a real orchestra at some point, but it costs like $50,000 just to do it. Yeah, but you get to record a real orchestra. Awesome. You can write all the music for it. Not being paid for this one right now, but they're going to give you some money for. We're going to do a Kickstarter soon or GoFundMe and we're gonna put some stuff to the music budget. So like getting different instruments and sound recording, sort of Celtic Renaissance-ish. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Have to write music that way, and I never wrote like make people's music. I usually write kind of cyberpunk, sci-fi-ish music.
Is he working?
This is just like an indie group that we're doing. It's like 7 of us right now, but we're trying to expand our group slowly. We're making the worlds and everything else. The little COVID trip. What's the concept of it? So right now we're trying. I don't think we've gone that far yet with a story or anything. Hairstyle is the name of the project right now. This is just a name. Because the whole idea of it in the beginning was to have these characters that we could create with these really insane different hair designs. So I mean, just character creation, and it's been expanding ever since then. About this making a world, and we're really in the Lord of the Rings, Dark Souls, Skyrim, Dragon Age. Just give me one guy, so you can have an idea. And then on the PC, we're using. Hey, David.
Hello.
I think we're using Unreal Engine.
It's hiding back there,
The VR.
wherever you want. It's in that cabinet back there. So if you want it back there, you can. If you want to use this table up here, if you want.
They've been working on it for a little while beforehand. I just preferred doing it one day, and I said, hey, I do wanting to be a composer and doing sound design and stuff like that. And, I love to go on your team, and I work just for fun, do it for free, have fun with it. So I joined them, and I've written up about 8 to 9 minutes of music so far. And this is what I do in my spare time when I'm not doing homework. I just write music. It's a lot of fun. Challenging, but fun.
I mean, I'm probably told you this earlier, but like I played in Function for 6 years.
Nice.
Like, I really like music. I wasn't crazy with how occasionally those types of videos don't get much money. Right.
Yeah, I think the great thing about the the composing nowadays is that you have so much software. Like you really do have like sample libraries now that help make fire audio, and they're releasing older samples that they recorded. Fire audio is the same company that record all of Hans Zimmer's orchestra. Like that's the same. Basically, it sounds very much like that Zimmer dynamic. Our library, pretty much all this weird stuff that Zimmer would have to do. They vibe of the song. It's really good. Like they're doing a really good job of it. To a point where you don't even know how to, you can just go and start writing music now. These are all on your workstation and good enough that you recognize $40,000. I started playing piano at the age of 5, so my sister really did a lot of art. And she's taught enough of the basic sound, signatures, like that. She more experience. I studied playing instruments in 6th grade or something like that. So you started at 5. Wow. I wish I would have started. I quit piano for a while and I regret it. I just lost. I had no passion for music, and then it's kind of ironic. I played Mass Effect and I got back into music. I just love the music in it, and then ever since then I've just been branching off into everything else. It's been an eye opener.
There's also a ton of like, you know, programs used to make music now, and they're not like, you know, low quality like they used to be. They're really giving it good sound samples.